Hi, I'm Elizabeth Whitten, and with me today on the Downhome Podcast is Dennis Flynn. This is his second appearance on the podcast, and this time he's talking with me about a trip he took to St-Pierre-Miquelon that was featured in the July issue of Downhome magazine. Thank you for joining me today.
Pleasure to be here.
So when did you start planning your trip to St-Pierre-Miquelon?
Well, it's interesting. I've been down to St-Pierre-Miquelon a number of times over the years, and I guess my first time there was a solo biking trip in the late 1990s, which seems like a long time ago now. But I loved it so much that I've had some opportunities to go back and do some exploration for photography and for just going around doing some sightseeing and whatnot. And I also went back to do the wonderful race, which I can't recommend enough, the 25-kilometer race on the island of Miquelon in 2013. That's just spectacular. So this year, there was an opportunity, or in 2017, there was an opportunity to go back and to hike across Miquelon, have a hiking excursion from the center of the town, basically, to the highest point on the archipelago, have an overnight on a beach, and finish up the next day. So, so I started looking at that early in the summer, and it worked out wonderfully. It's a fabulous trip all the way around.
Yeah, what made you want to visit the first time? You mentioned you went there back in '98. So what drew you there?
Well, as funny as it sounds, I've been fortunate enough to do a bit of traveling and a bit of riding and some excursions to places in Europe. In particular, I remember being in France in '97 in Paris, and being in Quebec City as well, different times. And you're kind of thinking, my gosh, there's something undeniably unique and interesting and intriguing about French culture. Now, unfortunately, my linguistic skills are non-existent, but I do have an appreciation of French history and of French culture and architecture. And so, it seemed a crying shame not to visit the wonderful French islands of St-Pierre-Miquelon right next door when having traveled so far abroad to experience what was offered on other parts of France. Yeah.
Right. Do you think people in Newfoundland and Labrador generally know there's this little slice of Europe right next door to us?
It's sort of, you sort of see it in tourism or in a lot of things. I believe it's called the donut effect. We have a tendency to go around the attractions that are right in our backyard and say, oh gosh, it'd be nice to go there someday. But we don't often do it enough, or to the extent that we should. So I think that may have been in the past a slight awareness issue for St-Pierre-Miquelon, that people just did not realize, A, how beautiful it is, how friendly it is, C, how accessible it is, and just the wealth and depth of experiences that are offered there. But they're doing, I have to say, to the credit of folks like the legendary coasts of Newfoundland and the St-Pierre Tourism Association, and also, I guess, the Heritage Run of Newfoundland and Labrador tourism. All these folks, and of course, the Downhome magazine with their recent article they just did on this St-Pierre-Miquelon attractions. The awareness is being put out there, and it's a wonderful destination on so many levels.
Right, and it's so nearby. It's like a quick plane ride or like a under-hour ferry ride, and you get so much. Oh, sorry.
No, go right ahead. No, absolutely, it sure is. It's like I said, maybe 55 minutes on the ferries that I was taking, and they have new ferries on now, which are, I think, a little faster even. It might be down about 45-minute ride. And it's a very, very short plane ride from St. John's, and or other parts of Canada. I believe they also instituted a new direct service from Paris to St-Pierre-Miquelon this summer, is my understanding.
Yeah, because St-Pierre-Miquelon is a part of France, and you go there and it's unmistakably French, from the architecture to the French pastries you might enjoy there.
Definitely. And you certainly hit on something that it's not like you're going to something that is approximating France. It is France. It's the collective. They've had a long, long history there. I mean, the Portuguese found the islands around 1520. Of course, Jacques Cartier, the famous French explorer, claimed them as French territory in 1536. It's changed hands a number of times between the British and the French, as a lot of North America did as a result of varying wars and treaties. Captain James Cook, the famous English explorer, got his start actually mapping St-Pierre-Miquelon in the 1760s, and he did such a good job. They invited him back, and he mapped Newfoundland and Labrador. And today you can go to places in Newfoundland and look out and stand on the island, stand on places like Francois on the south coast of Newfoundland. And when you're up on top of the Friar Mountain, you're looking over, and you really get the feel of how close it is, because from the top of the Friar, which is about 680 feet or so high, you can see Miquelon in a distance on a good day. It's only 25 or 30 kilometers stretch. So that connection is there. You do have the feeling that you're in Europe when you're in St-Pierre-Miquelon, but you also have a feeling of familiarity. So it's foreign yet familiar. It feels a little bit exotic, but almost every day. And it also has a tiny feel of being away from here, but always welcoming, always like home, which is how you're made to be. Yes, which is how you're treated and how you're made to feel.
Right. And in your article, you listed 10 things to do in St-Pierre-Miquelon.
Well, absolutely.
What was your favorite?
You know what? Truthfully, they were all different experiences. Every time I went, I always wished, gosh almighty, I wish I had some time to do something else. Or I would talk to somebody, and they'd say, next time you come back, you should do this. So I figured I would pick out 10 things that, depending on your time and your inclination, you could take in. I certainly loved, there's a tour for everything in St. Pierre. If you only have a day or two, certainly go take a tour. There are minivan tours and private individuals in your hotels or your bed and breakfasts can certainly put you in touch with somebody who'll give you a great little tour. The islands are relatively small. St. Pierre is the smaller one, of course, and in Miquelon, Langlade are joined by this beautiful sandy isthmus. That's the bigger one. So you start with a tour, get a feel for the place, see what you like. You can even rent a bicycle over there. It's a great way to travel around and get the exposure of a place. You can't beat walking in St-Pierre-Miquelon. The new ferries will accommodate cars, eventually when all that comes into being. But you really don't need it. I certainly walk around. It's beautiful. It's a very European feel for the layout of the city, and can't recommend that enough. I certainly loved the museum, the Arch Museum. It's a spectacular modern facility, very equivalent for folks from Newfoundland and Labrador. You might compare it to our provincial museum in St. John's, the rooms, that type of a feel. Now, not quite a different layout, a different architectural style, but it certainly celebrates the history and the architecture and the wonderful influences of French culture on the archipelago. So that's a great thing to do. Also, if you have one of the other things I really, really recommend is if you have the time, or definitely try to make the time, to go over to Île-aux-Marins, and that's a little island that's in the harbor from St. Pierre. It's probably like a 5 or 10 minute boat ride. There's tours leave all the time there from right around the central Charles de Gaulle marina there, and you can walk around take it maybe an hour and a half to walk around and see it all. There's a beautiful little museum and a former schoolhouse, gorgeous church, a Calvary, a graveyard, an old graveyard, and even on the back of the island, if you want to go a little further, there's a shipwreck, a modern shipwreck, remnants of a steel boat there. Of course, St-Pierre-Miquelon are very, very well known for their shipwrecks over the centuries. There are, I would imagine, hundreds, if not thousands, in those waters. It was a very treacherous place. So as a consequence of that, makes it a very interesting place for those who are modern day explorers. I've known Newfoundland divers to organize expeditions to go down there, and being quite pleasantly surprised with the richness of marine life and things they've seen underwater. I also had the opportunity a number of years ago to go down and take a Zodiac tour, and that's a stunning way to see the archipelago. You leave from St-Pierre and go over to Langlade and pass by the Barrachois, and you can see seals and eagles and whales and and puffins and seabirds galore. And even getting ashore is a bit of fun. Just an all-around adventure. When we were there for the race, I remember running along doing that race, and we ended up encountering horses. There were these modern-day horses are mostly owned by people, but they let them loose on Miquelon, on the bigger island, and you running along on the beach yourself and seeing horses on the sand dunes. And it's a throwback, of course, to horses that were shipwrecked at different points on the island, and the importance of them. Being a touching moment was at one point I stepped into a little church in Miquelon, and was up in the choir and just sitting and admiring the beautiful stained glass windows in this wonderful church, commemorating saints and significant moments in the history of the islands. And I looked behind me, and someone had installed this striking small stained glass window in the choir area depicting horses and ponies on the sand dunes. So it meant enough to the people there that they commemorated in the most significant building in their town in the form of the stained glass window. So there's it's just an interesting, lovely place. Thinking of other things, if you do have time, certainly take one of the walking tours. There's some beautiful walking tours that are arranged out of the tourism office, which is again right in St-Pierre proper. It's right down around Place Charles de Gaulle. It's easy to find. They're very friendly, very helpful. Everyone's certainly in the tourism industries and the hotels and the accommodations industries and the restaurants. Most people have very, very good English language skills, and very friendly. The euro is the currency, but Canadian dollars are generally accepted and translated with ease. It has its own time zone, which is a little different. We sometimes we can certainly appreciate that in Newfoundland because we have our own, but they've got one as well, which is a half-hour difference. And what else was there that was unique? Oh yes, of course, it's European currency, so make sure to bring an adapter, little tiny travel things of that nature. But overall, you'll be very, very impressed. Like I say, the food and the wine, and if you're so inclined, are all distinct and excellent. And it just has a feel of a little more relaxed, not quite the hurry of the rest of North America. We tend to be focused on go and around the clock work, and have a very much more relaxed and civilized way of doing things in St-Pierre-Miquelon, to my mind anyway. Meals take a long time, but there's no rush with it. It's a part of a ritual of chatting and getting to know whoever's across the table from you. Just a glorious way to relax and unwind and soak up all the French connections.
Well, you make a very good case to go visit. Thanks for joining me today, Dennis.
Totally my pleasure.
Downhome Magazine's July issue is out on stands now, so you can pick it up and read Dennis Flynn's article, Top 10 Things to Do in St-Pierre-Miquelon. You can also head on over to the Downhome website at downhomelife.com. Thanks for listening.